It's like I feel something's coming. I can feel it in my belly and I don't like it.
How do you feel about the state of the UK right now?
That thing that they generally don't want, digital ID, to be something that I can say will fix the other thing they've got a serious problem with, which is mass immigration. And that's what they've been doing. Like I say, no one's coming to save us, so we've got to organise.
Do you see the Epstein files ever getting released?
I think they have compromat on all of these people, and that compromat is just hidden. And when it's ready, it will come out.
If Trump is bought and paid for, do you think America has ever had an actual president for the people? You have 2030 seems to be the deadline for a lot of these agendas. What are some of the things that we really should be paying attention to?
Suddenly, the state can control whether you can eat, essentially, what you can do. That's huge.
You know, the secret societies. Do you think this goes down to like the Freemasons, or who do you think is pulling the strings?
Yeah, he said, and then I uncovered a satanic paedophile ring. And I went, all right, I'm listening.
Before we begin, as a special favour to me, could I ask that you subscribe to the channel? It costs you nothing but means the world to us. Recently, YouTube was nice enough to delete our old account. But fortunately, that hasn't stopped us. In fact, we're more determined than ever, and that's why we need your support. Anyways, enough from me. I hope you enjoy. Gareth, really appreciate the chance to talk. Big fan of the content that you guys are putting out over on Iconic. And of course, big fan of your dad, David Icke.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate that. The way the world's gone, it's funny because the worse the world gets, the less we get called names, I suppose. You know, every cloud and all that. I wish it wasn't so, but you know, it's a strange time at the minute. I don't know if that's something you're feeling as well, mate. I feel like we're close to something, and that something isn't necessarily a good thing. Do you know what I mean? It's like it feels like there's a bit of a powder keg at the minute.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. In fact, you know, it must have been interesting when you were growing up, because I remember like early in your dad's career, you know, he was mocked probably on a national level. And yet as time's gone on, obviously he's just been found right on so many issues. When you were a kid, did you experience any of the negative side, or has it just been credibility's gone up and up as time's gone on?
Oh, mate, it was brutal. It was brutal, mate. So for me, it's a weird one because Dad was famous anyway. He was famous for presenting the football and the snooker, particularly on the telly. So for me as a kid, I mean, I was born in 81, so I was probably 6-7 years old at the height of his fame, right, with that sort of stuff. So, you know, you'd end up with, if you had a mate coming around, like the parents would always bring him around so that they could, you know, meet him. And like, I mean, days before camera phones. So you'd still get like autograph people and that sort of stuff. And then literally what feels like that, it went from people shouting, David, love you, mate, to shouting abuse. And as a kid, you know, obviously I was like, how old would I have been? 1990, 8 years old, pushing 9. It was like, yeah, it was weird because I didn't really compute that. It didn't really make any sense to me because it was like my dad was dead popular. Suddenly my dad was being laughed at, which was quite weird. And then obviously that passed on to me in terms of getting grief. And it wasn't very nice. And I don't mean it to come across as well as me because I'm not at all. You know, some people have lives like far worse. And actually now I look back, I think that was basic training because that sort of beat it out of me, that kind of desire to be popular. That never really, it hasn't occurred to me for well over 30 years. You know, the idea of that, like, because I thought about it during COVID, you know, particularly COVID was a big example of it, where I was just saying, like, this is bullshit. And I was getting private messages from old school friends and old football colleagues going, mate, I'm with you, but I can't say that, dude. Like, I can't, just know that we agree with what you're saying, but I can't say that, which is disappointing. But that kind of then led me to think, well, I'm going to say it louder then, because I'll sort of say it for other people if they give me permission to. Like, I wouldn't normally speak for other people, but people have said to me a bunch of times, you know, how come you don't give a shit? Because lots of people say, I don't care what people think. And you're like, yeah, you do, really. Whereas me, like, I care what my wife thinks. I care what my kids think of me, obviously. But and I don't say things just to piss people off on purpose. But if I believe something to be true, then I'll say it, win, lose or draw. And I don't think I'd necessarily be like that if I hadn't had best part of a decade of shit, really. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Probably the best training available.
Yeah, pretty much.
And you're right. You know, it's the fear of ostracization which kept people in line. If no one had that, maybe we would have been in a different situation.
Big time, mate. And that was the thing, particularly with the Rona period. The reason I use that as an example is because it affected everyone, right? Like, so there's rabbit holes people can go down, but you might not necessarily be affected by 9/11. If you didn't have family in the towers, if you didn't have military friends that went over there, if you didn't have relatives in Iraq, that people could disassociate themselves from it. It's something over there, over the rainbow. Whereas with that stuff, I mean, that was everywhere, wasn't it? It was, so it's a really good example for me and a good barometer to see how people will react to stuff. And, I mean, I've always had a bit of authority problem anyway, to be honest. But I think that desire to speak the truth and just not have it was something that was definitely there from childhood. And a lot of it came from, as you've just said, that fear of ostracization. That wasn't there. And so I would talk to people and they'd say, my mates don't talk to me anymore. My family think I'm mad. My work colleagues, like, they don't invite me out on nights out anymore. Like, all this stuff happened. And I'm there going, mate, I feel for you. But like, for me, like, I lost the normies a long time ago. So I didn't have that fear during COVID of thinking, well, if I say what I believe to be true and what is blatantly true anyway, I'll get stick for it. It kind of didn't bother me because the kind of people that were going to give me stick for it were going to give me stick for something else otherwise anyway.
Yeah, I felt the same way. Obviously, right now, we have our free speech, which is under attack with the online safety bill. On top of that, we have never-ending immigration. How do you feel about the state of the UK right now?
I'm trying to think of a kind of more eloquent way of saying it's on its arse. But I think it's meant to be. I think this is the point. I think, and I was talking about this on the show this week, often what happens is the state will do certain things to divert people's attention from stuff. So it kind of wants you focused on something, get annoyed about that, get annoyed about Muslims or whatever while we're doing this and you're not focusing on what we're doing here. And that's kind of sinister, but that's been going on since the dawn of time. But I think what they're doing now, actively doing, is they're winding up the population, not to distract them from something, but to actually use that as an excuse for something to do what they want to do. So if you come in with an attitude and you go, right, well, they want digital ID, that's just one part of it, but I think it's actually quite a major part of it. Because once you control that, you close so many avenues for freedom with that. So you go, right, well, they want digital ID. They vocalize that. They're open about it. Tony Blair was pushing for it when he came in 97. So this is a long-term plan. The Labour Party are pushing for it. They've had, I'm trying to think how many Labour MPs it was. I think it was over 20 signed an open letter, I think about 6 months ago, where they were talking about bringing in digital ID as a result of mass immigration, which is mass immigration that they facilitated, obviously. And then to kind of make the point that it doesn't matter who you vote for, you've got Reform MPs coming out and saying on live television, I don't see what the problem is with digital ID. So like, okay, well, this has gone from being two cheeks of the same arse in Labour and Conservative to now the arse has just got three cheeks with Reform in it. And then you think, well, how are you going to get that? How are you going to make that happen? Because people don't want it, not really. But most of the people that don't want digital ID, I mean, this is a generalization, but I'd say overall, most of the people that don't want the digital ID, they don't want AI stuff, that they're pushing against it, would be people that would be perceived to be on the right. People that are, maybe more perceived to be on the left tend to be more embracing of technology. Again, like I say, it's a generalization, but it tends to be that way. So you think if you want to get digital ID through, I mean, if you think about the COVID time, again, as an example, it was the right that was pushing against authoritarianism. It tended to be the left that were kind of put your mask on, you're killing granny. They was buying it, which was bizarre to me because most of my friendship group was at that point was from the anti-war movement. And I was looking at them going, are you having a laugh? So you need to get that side, that right side, you need to get them on board with digital ID. So you need to look at what they don't like. So what do the right have a problem with? Well, they have a problem with mass unfiltered immigration. Of course they do. They have a problem, an enormous number of people being put in migrant hotels and abusing girls, which has been happening. It's not just a one-off, like this is happening fairly regularly. They've got a problem with that. So you go, okay, well, I want to get them to agree with something. So what I need to get them to agree with that is I need to get that thing that they generally don't want digital ID, to be something that I can say will fix the other thing they've got a serious problem with, which is mass immigration. And that's what they've been doing. And the other element of it is the more that you can poke those people, more you can make them angry, more you can make them kick off, you can then bring in legislation to counteract that. So I've been saying for a while that what the establishment, there's two groups that the establishment doesn't have a problem with. People that are sat at home watching Bargain Hunt, not doing anything, not bothered. Who am I? I can't change anything. They're fine because they're done. And the other group they don't have a problem with, not really, is the group that will happily throw a rock at a copper. They're fine with them as well because, well, you can arrest them. You can give them ridiculous prison sentences. You can make an example of them and you can use them as an excuse to bring in the draconian measures that you want to bring in. And I think what they're doing is there's a middle group that they have a problem with, and that's those that will peacefully non-comply. I'm not going to throw a rock at a copper, but I'm not going to sit at home watching Bargain Hunt saying I'm defeated. I'm going to stand in the middle. I'm going to go, I ain't doing it. I'm not going along with it, but I'm very peaceful in it, very peaceful in my protest, but I'm not doing it. So they're trying, I think, at the moment, by winding people up to push more of that middle group towards the anger. And what I worry about, and this is what I was saying at the start, in terms of like I feel something's coming. I can feel it in my belly and I don't like it, that there's going to be some kind of false flag or a terrorist, or we're told a terrorist attack, something that is going to, like Southport did, but I think on a bigger scale, that will really push that middle group towards anger and will push them onto the streets and will create a civil war. Because people say all the time, well, why would the government want a civil war? And you're like, well, because it answers every single one of their prayers. They can bring in everything they want at that point. You can bring in lockdowns, which they love. You can bring in curfews, military checkpoints. You can get rid of cash because you can say the terrorists are using cash because, well, I don't know where he bought his fertilizer from because he brought it with cash. So we need a digital currency. We need a digital ID where we know who's buying everything and where they're buying it. And it's for your protection, of course, mate. Do you know what I mean? And you can just see that that's where they're leading. And what I hope, mate, is that people are quite savvy to that. And actually, when you talk to people one-on-one, they tend to go, yeah, I think there's something going on here. And I think just in recent days, I get accused, right, of not taking victories, and I don't mean to be like that. And I'm not a neg Nelly, actually. I'm, tend to be quite optimistic. But there's this thing at the moment where they're moving people out of migrant hotels. They're allowing these court orders, obviously, to close down these migrant hotels. And everyone's celebrating that. That's a good thing. And you're like, yeah, on the face of it, it is. But where are the people going? Because they're not getting taken out of the migrant hotel, put on the next Brittany ferry or P&O ferry and sent back to Calais. That's not what's happening. So where are they going? They're going somewhere. And actually, the government has openly been talking about closing the migrant hotels long before what happened in Epping. They want them in what they say is temporary accommodation, but it's not. Of course, it's permanent accommodation because they're not going to send these people back. So what they want is, I think, looking around, I think the cities, a lot of cities are kind of lost in the UK. There's a few towns now that I feel, are going that way. So what's the safest, what's the last bastion of England? Is the villages. They're the places that you turn up and everyone knows everyone, and there's community, and there's a local pub and everyone chats, and there's, whatever the village name, in bloom, and they've all got, flower displays and all this kind of stuff. Well, they want to destroy everything. So what you'll find is that they will take these people out of the hotels and they'll scatter them out, not into the towns, not into the cities, but into the villages. Because if I put 200 men into a town of 50,000 people, I mean, it'll have an effect on that particular area, maybe where they're located, but it ain't going to make a huge difference. You put 200 men in London, I mean, no one's noticing. You put 200 men into a village of, say, 800 people. It's a game changer. Changes it like that. And that's what they want. And so by doing this, they'll scatter them out. And then what I think they will do then is they'll go, oh, we've lost track of them all. Yeah, we've lost them. If only we had some kind of biometric ID system that everyone had to have so that they could purchase food or they could, use public transport, then everyone would have to get it. And that would mean they'd have to get it. So then we'd know where they were. Yeah, let's go for it. And you can see these problems being created so that they can offer the solution that you'll find people on the right that would go, oh, I don't want digital ID, but if it helps protect my kids, if it helps protect the local school from what you can just see it happening, can't you, mate? And that's what I worry.
The lesser of two evils kind of thing.
Totally. So you have a situation where you go, like, say, United States, for instance, Trump's the savior in a lot of people's minds, and you go, "You being serious?" Like, the guy's a total douchebag. The reason you think he's a savior is because you compared him to Joe Biden, or you compared him to Hillary Clinton or Kamala Harris. What you've got is you've been given a choice of AIDS versus cancer, and you've gone, well, I'll pick that one. It's not, and that's the point, isn't it? The lesser of two evils.
This is it. And I find, people could point the finger at Starmer all day, but one, like you say, we've been heading in this direction for some time now, and two, it doesn't matter who you get in; they all seem to go the same agenda. But that being said, I mean, how do you feel about reform? Is this just, the so-called People's Party, right?
I'm not convinced, mate. I think it's a way of distracting. I think it's a way of keeping people in the political sphere, because what united people, I think, massively during the Rona time was there was no saviour, and everyone knew there wasn't. Like, you had the Tory government who were pushing this draconian bullshit, and you had the Labour government waiting in the wings saying, I want to lock down harder. Like, there was no alternative. Yeah. People talk about reform. Farage was out there whacking his pots and pans at 8 p.m. saying that Tony Blair should be the vaccine czar. So Richard Tice was out there saying that nurses shouldn't be allowed to work in the NHS if they weren't jabbed. For me, like, I judge someone not on what they say when it's socially acceptable to say it, but what did you say when we were at the coalface? You were nowhere. Richard Tice wasn't on those COVID protests. Neither was Nigel Farage. They were nowhere. None of them were. They were nowhere to be seen. That's not to say that reform doesn't have great people at the grassroots. I'm sure it does. I'm sure even some of the local councillors are probably great people who believe in something. But for me, it's a way of steering people away from the realization that it's on us. People accuse us here at Iconic all the time, like, you've got no solutions. It's like, no, I have got solutions. I'm just telling you it's not in politics. I'm just telling you that multi-millionaire who used to work in the city of London with that £1,000 suit on, I'm just telling you he's not the saviour. I'm not. I'm saying you are. The people are saviours, and that's what did it during Rona. You think about all those things they wanted to bring in, the vaccine mandates and all that stuff. It was what, 500,000 NHS staff that refused to take it. They were the ones that changed that. They're the ones that got that overturned. They were the care home workers that refused to have it, to the point where they knew the care home system was going to collapse without them, so they lifted the mandates. They were the ones that made the difference. No politician made any difference. Didn't do anything. The mainstream media bobbleheads, none of them did anything. You had all the fake alternative ones, like your Julie Hartley Brewers, that sort of pretended to be against the narrative whilst wearing a mask so they could go and have a pina colada on a beach somewhere. Like, wow, what a rebel. But it was the people that stood up. And I think what happened during Rona was that there was that realization of, like I say, no one's coming to save us. So we've got to organize. We've got to do it ourselves. And we did, particularly in England. Actually, when you compare to other nations, England was actually in the protest sphere was actually the envy of the world. You had your trucker protests in Canada, but they came later. They came off the back of the mass protest in England. I say England, mate, rather than the UK, because I went to Scotland, I went to Wales during that time, and their protest movement was very small, and their restrictions went on for way longer than ours. That wasn't a coincidence. I remember talking in a protest in London. There's about 40,000 people there. The following week, I went down to Cardiff, 900.
Wow.
And Wales kept its restrictions, and England didn't. Like I say, that's not a coincidence, because Cardiff is a major city. It's not like it was a protest in a back-end village near Aberdare or something. It wasn't. It was in a major city. And so I think reform maybe are there to steer people back to politics again. And it's happened. There's lots of people that I had conversations with in the last few years that were going, doesn't matter who you vote for, the government get in, that are now suddenly going, well, if we vote for them, and you go, I'll tell you what will happen. You'll vote for them. They'll get in. Nothing will change. And then in 4 years, you'll go, there's no point voting. And then there'll come another election, and you'll get this bizarre, this just amnesia will just come all over you. And you'll go, oh no, this guy will be different. and then you repeat
exactly.
it 4 years later.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people do say paid opposition, and like, especially obviously a hot topic right now, but whenever Gaza Israel gets brought up, Farage is just non-wavering, super pro-Israel.
Yeah.
Really doesn't help his defense. And then on the same topic, I mean, you mentioned him a bit earlier. So do you believe that Trump is a puppet as well then?
100%. 100%. I mean, the compromat that they must, because this is the point. Like, you look at something, you go, it's unbelievable, isn't it? The power that Netanyahu has over all these politicians. And it's like, yeah, because he's got the Epstein files, mate. He knows what's on them. He knows exactly what's on them. And that's why they have the control that they have. So you have a situation where through AIPAC, through the Israel lobby, which is pretty powerful in the UK as well, by the way, they can fund They can fund people. And politicians, who by their very nature are crooks, will take the money. But there are every now and then some that won't. Or some that will look at their political career, because they're all narcissists, they'll look at their political career and they'll go, do you know what? My unwavering support of Israel in comparison to the way public opinion has turned is not good for me. So actually, I'm going to jump ship onto the Palestinian side and call it out. No, you're not, mate, because here's a video of you doing X, Y, and Z. Here's a photo of you doing X, Y, and Z. And it's not just the Epstein files, by the way, either. The cybersecurity infrastructure in Israel is insane. Like, it's literally everywhere. And they have backdoor access to everyone's computers. If you look at who owns most of, if not all of, all of the major VPN providers, they all go back to Israel. So you've now got people that are alternative that are like, I'm going to get past the online safety bill. I'm going to use a VPN. I don't want them tracking me. Oh, they're tracking you, mate. It's just not who you think it is. And so that's a major part. That's a major part of it is compromat. It's huge, blackmail. I mean, blackmail's always been around in politics. Of course it is, you know. But on that scale, as it is at the minute, is insane, mate. It's insane. Yeah.
Do you see the Epstein files ever getting released?
Well, it depends if we win or not. If we win as a human race, then yeah. But I think the point is, when they started talking about releasing them, I said from the start, and again got called a black pill doom-monger, but I said there's no way they'll release them, mate. There's no way they'll release them. Because it's not just a Mossad operation, Epstein. I mean, Epstein was bigger than that anyway. He's going into transhumanism and all this shit. Like, that stuff is even darker than just trafficking girls, which is fucking dark enough as it is. But you had the CIA involvement in that as well. So you've got a blackmail operation which is controlling politicians, it's controlling media moguls, it's controlling leaders of industry. Why the frick would you give that up? Because the minute you give it up, it's done. You've got no leverage over those people anymore because it's already out there. So what I thought they might do is like they did with like Operation U-Tree and stuff like that in terms of elite paedophilia in the UK, is they'll give you a few P-list names and they'll give you a few names of people that are dead. Because obviously dead people don't talk. So you give a few dead people, you appease them. Trump didn't even do that. Like, they literally gave you nothing. They had a few influencers dancing around with ring binders outside the White House, which to me was mad anyway at the time, because it was like, say I'm not an influencer, but pretend I was pro-Trump and I was invited to the White House to review the Epstein files, which is mad in itself that an influencer is given that gig. It should be put out to the public domain and everyone does their own journalism personally. But if I was given that ring binder and I had a list of names and sexual crimes against children and young people, I'm not sure I'd be dancing with it for TikTok videos, which is what they were doing. And I found that bizarre at the time. It's like, you do know what's in those, what this story of Epstein is about elite child trafficking. And I don't think that's worth a jig, if I'm honest. Like, I found that really strange. And so then you look at it and you go, right, so they've been given these files. I don't know about you, mate, but I've never seen what's inside any of them. Nothing. Then suddenly they're going to be released, all of them. Then they're on Pam Bondi's desk. Then they don't exist. Then they're a hoax. Then Clinton and Obama are in them, and now they've gone back to not existing again.
Yes, yeah.
Someone's lying.
The gaslighting is on a whole nother level.
It's extraordinary. Yeah, and I'm at a point now where, you know, I get the feeling that Trump's a cult. Because a cult is something that you make excuses for. I think a lot of religions are like that, where you ask a question and there's no answer that you can possibly answer. So you say God works in mysterious ways. Well, great throwaway. Well, great way of explaining something you can't explain. And with Trump, it's the same. And I did look at the Epstein stuff, and I thought, oh, do you know what? This could be interesting. Actually, this could get people to start asking questions. But so many just went straight back to supporting him again. And you're like, if you can look the other way on child trafficking, I don't know what. Is there anything you won't look the other way on?
Yeah, exactly. You would think, the right and left are always divided, and it makes sense, right? Divide and conquer.
Yeah.
But you think if there was ever going to be a topic where it would unite people, this would be it.
100%.
And like you say, the right were almost looked at as the people with morals, the people with ethics. And then, like you say, if they're willing to turn a blind eye to this, okay, well, you've lost.
Yeah. And that's the thing, isn't it? That's the tribal stuff. That's the thing that keeps us massively divided. And it's been it for a while, but I feel like it's really amplified lately, where it's not who's doing something, and it's not what's being done, and it's not what's being said. It's who's doing it and who's saying it that determines whether you either support it or you don't support it. And that's not right. For me, if you're going to have a political sphere, how it's supposed to work in terms of it all just keep turning and everything keeps going by in as best way as possible, is that if I support a certain party, for instance, because maybe more times than the other party, they go along with things that I align with. But at the same time, if the other party does something or proposes something that's good, well, then support that then, because that's good. And when your party does something that's wrong, call it out. And if both sides did that, just instantly you would create a better environment, a better situation where both sides would, in theory, if they want to stay elected, would have to do more good stuff that would help the population. But they don't. People will look the other way on Trump being involved with Epstein whilst hammering the Clintons for being involved with Epstein. And then you've got the other side, the I'm with her brigade that support Hillary, oh, she should have been the president, that are now turning on Trump saying, you're not releasing the Epstein files. Well, your side didn't release them either. And it's the same with in this country, where you've got the Conservatives calling out Labour for not cracking down on the grooming gangs. You didn't do it for 14 years, mate. You did nothing.
Yeah,
it's extraordinary.
Exactly. Yeah, although, I mean, there is some I am slightly optimistic, because I do see a lot of people who were real strong believers in Trump now starting to turn away. And a lot of people, not just the Epstein stuff, but everything which is going on in Gaza as well, a lot of attention is getting drawn to Israel. And naturally, the Jewish faith is getting brought into it as well. And I mean, one of the things that I find so concerning is before it was very easy to control the narrative. Everyone's mostly getting their information from the mainstream. Then you look at who controls the media. You look at who controls Hollywood. You look at the music industry. You even look at the porn industry. It raises a lot of red flags for people. And this is where Israel really, for me, this is where they are in the spotlight,
Massively. I mean, it's funny how much they've lost control of the narrative. Because for me, there's a lot of people that think this whole thing started on October 7th. I went to Israel in 2007, and I went there to play beach soccer against them, actually. And it is a strange place in terms of their attitude towards stuff as a country. It's not as a faith. It claims to be representative of Jewish people. They couldn't care less about Jewish people. They couldn't care less. That's why Netanyahu called them lab rats for Pfizer during COVID. They couldn't care less. They couldn't care less about them, which is why they'd happily sacrifice their own people on October 7th, which is exactly what they did. And there's more and more evidence for that emerging in Israeli media. And that's another mad thing, mate, is the Israeli media will go further in calling out what's going on in Israel than the Western media would dream of, which is mad. But I went there and I played beach soccer against them. And I'd played all over the world. For about 5 years, I played for England. And there was one place I played where kids threw stones at me on the pitch. And it was there. But when I called it out, and I spoke to some of their management team after the game, I got called names. I didn't get called an anti-Semite, thankfully. They reserved that for later. I got called that for about 15 years. But
Nice. Yeah.
but their immediate response was to attack me for calling out what was going on. And I was looking at them and I was going, are you being serious? I've just told you that your fans are chucking stones at me and you're getting annoyed at me. Like, that blew my mind. But there is this ultimate victim mentality. So their answer to a question is, I'm the victim. It's like, well, I didn't ask you that, but that's how it is. And that used to work. And it doesn't work anymore. And once you've lost the narrative on that, then I don't see how it goes back, really, to be honest. So it's quite an interesting time. But what I will say, which I find maybe slightly more concerning, and it's something that I've vocalized for a while through the whole anti-Semitism crisis, or so-called anti-Semitism crisis with Jeremy Corbyn, is whatever people think of Jeremy Corbyn, whether people like Jeremy Corbyn or not, is irrelevant. The guy's not an anti-Semite. He isn't. And so the fact that they were just calling, the fact they were expelling Jewish members of the Labour Party for anti-Semitism, like they made it mean nothing. They made it irrelevant. It doesn't mean anything anymore. In the same way that everything 20 years ago was sexist, so suddenly nothing's sexist. And then everything became racist, and suddenly nothing's racist then, because it doesn't mean anything anymore. You know, I remember when I was first called an anti-Semite, I was like, that. What? No, I'm not. And in fact, I probably said I've got Jewish friends or something. It's a ridiculous, riposte, because I was annoyed. I was like, why would they say that? Now, if someone says it, I'm like, what, am I? What, for opposing genocide? Well, call me it, and I don't care. Like, it doesn't mean anything anymore. And so as a result of that, you'll find the pendulum goes the other way. And so when I think back, like, people used to call out Zionism. People used to call out the state of Israel. They would call out Benjamin Netanyahu for the psychopath that he is, and they call out the IDF for the psychopaths that they are. Now people call out the Jews, and they don't care about saying it. And, you know, I remember doing an interview with a guy where he was talking about the Jews, and he kept saying the Jews. And I was going, can I just stop you there? So just to clarify, it's not all Jews, obviously. Of course it's not. In the same way, it's not all Muslims that are trying to, you know, not integrate and take over areas of the country. It's not. You know, and mate, I got called. He went at me. He went at me for being weak. You're weak because you won't say it's the Jews. And I'm like, mate, like, what the hell? It's like the pendulum has gone to that extent. And that's not a good thing either. Because then what they end up having is you end up having genuine anti-Jew hatred. Like, it's not the Jews. It's not. There is a fraction within Jewish society and within Jewish hierarchy which is behind certain things. In the same way that the Catholic Church is behind certain things, that doesn't mean that every Catholic is molesting kids in the Vatican. Like, it's not how it works. But people love to pigeonhole in the same way that if you oppose immigration, you're far right. Mm-hmm. You know, you might be a 75-year-old grandmother. Or what you're talking about. Same way with the COVID protests. You know, the far right. 40,000 far-right protesters against lockdowns, and you're looking at the photo in the paper, you're like, well, I can see 2 ear jabs, so it's the worst far-right rally I've ever seen in my life. But they like to pigeonhole, and that concerns me a little bit as well, mate, that that it's not that it's socially acceptable to say things, because I kind of think it should be acceptable to say everything. Like, I'm a free speech absolutist, and if it upsets you, that's fine, and if it upsets me, that's fine, I'll get over it. But I can't help but think that it's almost an intentional pendulum swing to start focusing on groups and blaming other groups within society. Because if you do that, then we fight that group within society. We don't fight the group which is above us all, which is controlling everything, which has its, I was going to say tentacles, but you get called anti-Semitic for that, but has its fingers in every single one of those groups. Because there'll be people at in the high end of Catholicism, of Islam, of Judaism, of Buddhism, of all of them. There'll be people at the top end of all of those which are there for nefarious motives. 100%. It's not the people that are part of that faith. Like, I'm not a religious guy. For me, like, but believe what you want. It doesn't bother me. That's fine. But I think that there's a worry for me there. It's
sure.
More, you know, it's more divide and conquer.
Well, it's a worry for everyone. And, you know, like you were saying with Trump being a puppet, The scary thing is America is literally the leader of the free world, arguably the strongest nation to ever exist. And if Trump is bought and paid for, and, you know, the previous presidents as well, when you see that they were doing all these wars which are massively benefiting Israel,
Yeah.
do you think America has ever had an actual president for the people?
No, probably not. Probably not, to be honest.
Not even JFK?
It's a difficult. I actually had this conversation with my brother. Actually, it's a difficult one because, you know, JFK comes from an elite family, an elite dynasty. These people don't get put there unless they're in the club. You know, like people would look at Richard Nixon and Reagan as, you know, as having, you know, differing policies in X, Y, and Z. Yet you can still see a photo of them sat together at dinners and they're hanging out at Bohemian Grove while they're bloody 20-foot owls being set on fire and all that mad nutty stuff. So it's like you don't get there unless you're in the club to a certain degree, but that doesn't mean that you don't go against it when you're there. Do you know what I mean? It's like playing in a football team. You're all in the same club, but not every player is the same, and some players can go rogue. Some players can do things that he's having a nightmare, take him off, or in that case, take him out. I mean, so there's an element of that for sure, but I just think, I feel like almost like the United States was a bit of a project, really. You know, like almost like a Petri dish. Because whatever happens in America gets exported to the world. Simple as that. So you've got all these different nations. It's almost like they went, right, what's a massive area of land there? Right, okay, well, we'll kick out the natives and almost use it as a Petri dish to grow social movements and whatever that you then export to the rest of the world. And that's what they do militarily. They export their stuff to the rest of the world. You look at any country that's on its arse. You look at the situation in Iran. People say, oh, my goodness me, look at this, the way that women are treated. And you go, okay, well, yeah, we can go back to the 1950s, to the CIA-backed coup and that led to all of that. You know, and you look at these Islamic countries, you know, I would get people at home, if you can, just Google the official dress of, say, Syria. Because you look at Syria, you look at Libya, you look at all these places, Palestine, and they'll give you the burqa, you know, you just see their eyes and all that kind of stuff. Look at the way that they're subjugating women, all this kind of stuff. And you go, okay, well, if you just look at the official dress of those nations, it ain't that. They're beautiful, bright colors, you know, hair out, fully visual. You know, they're the official historical dress of these countries. You know, the West essentially destroyed these countries and exported something, to them. But I think what we did is we exported a problem that you can then go to later. So if you think about it, you think about Afghanistan. Afghanistan was like that. People in Afghanistan, absolutely fine. Women, you know, driving around in cars with their legs out and all sorts. So then you back the Afghans in their war against the Soviet Union. You fund Osama bin Laden. You bring the Taliban into being or whatever. Okay, well, that's something we can use as a bogeyman for later. So we'll let that just sort of fester, and we've got a bogeyman for later. And then later on comes along 9/11, blame it on them, we'll go in, bosh. And I think that's exactly what they've done with Syria. So the guy that's taken charge of Syria, he was an Al Qaeda terrorist. He was on the most wanted list of the FBI's most wanted list. And you go, okay, so you overthrow Assad, which was done by the Americans, by the Brits, by Israel, by mercenaries on behalf of all these people. So you get rid of him, and you bring in a terrorist who's now got a fancy suit and a beard trim. And you go, okay, why would they do that? Well, because he'll go back to being a terrorist in a bit. And when he does go back to being a terrorist, then it gives you an excuse to go in. And when you go in, when Israel goes in, as they have done, they'll take up another sway of the land, which is exactly what they've done. Now, I said that on Trending when he first was brought into power. I said, I'll tell you what, he's a bogeyman for a few years down the line. I didn't think it would take 6 weeks. After 6 weeks, he started killing Alawites and all this kind of stuff, and the Druze, and suddenly it was like Israel had to go in, and I'm going, mate, they did it in 6 weeks. I thought 6 years maybe. They'd let him fester before they had a bogeyman to go in. 6 weeks, mate. It's insane. We create the enemies for later.
Yeah, and it's worrying because, like you're saying, if it used to take a few years to kind of set the narrative. But if they can speed it up to the space of 6 weeks, it almost shows complete dominance of the narrative. And like they know how to get public opinion so easily now, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's one way of looking at it. I'm trying to be an eternal optimist, so I'm going to try and go with the attitude of there is an awakening happening, like, and that's not in a hippie banging crystals together way. I just think there is. I think people now, they might not get the full picture, but they know something's not right. They know that the world they believed in 20 years ago is not the actual world. Now, that is both a very exciting time and a relatively dangerous time, because that awakening, that's amazing, that's exciting, but it depends where it's channeled. So what we're seeing at the moment is they're trying to channel that into it's the group, it's that group, it's that group, even to the point where someone like Alex Jones, which was all about there's a globalist cabal, is now it's the Democrats. He's gone from, everyone's gone back into this sort of political sphere where you just blame the other side. But I think...
How do you feel about Alex Jones nowadays then?
I'll be honest, I don't know. Like, it's a weird one. I've met him a couple of times. I always got on well with him. Who he is on camera and who he is in real life is the same person, which I find interesting because that's not always the way. I can't help but think the Sandy Hook stuff is related to it. So you've got someone that's anti-establishment, is kind of, there's a shadow government that is behind both parties. It's a uni party, doesn't matter who you vote for. That's always been his shtick. Suddenly that whole thing happens with Sandy Hook. He gets fined $1 billion. Where's that gone? Where's that story gone? It's disappeared. It's just gone. He's kept InfoWars, which he was going to lose. Suddenly he's got it, but now it is just a Trump and Elon Musk mouthpiece. So it's changed in what it was. And I can't help but think that maybe that problem of Sandy Hook has been allowed to go away on the condition that you're on our side now. I mean, that is, that's just me vocalizing an opinion. I have no evidence for that, but it seems to fit, in my mind at least, the flip. Because he was calling out Elon Musk for years, and then suddenly Elon's the greatest guy ever.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that also a lot of people were talking about is this whole Greater Israel thing. Yeah. We had Bibi Netanyahu already say that he's going to take control of the Gaza Strip. What exactly is Greater Israel?
The Greater Israel is essentially the biblical belief that the land of Israel is from the Nile to the Euphrates. That's the historical land of Israel. It's mad to me that in the year 2025, dismemberment of children is being justified by something that was written in a book. By who? Thousands of years ago. Is madness to me. Bearing in mind that the King James Bible, which is one that still a lot of people go off, was written by a guy who was James the 6th of Scotland and the 1st of England, which is confusing as hell anyway, how you can be two. But this was a guy that was burning witches at the stake in Edinburgh in the Berwick witch trials, some of them simply for having a birthmark. So we're going off the word of him. Okay, well, that's going to bode well in 2025. But yeah, so they believe that from the Nile to the Euphrates is the biblical land, the historical land, the land that is essentially promised to them by God. And when you look at what the Greater Israel is, in terms of the areas and the countries that it incorporates, it explains American foreign policy post 9/11 completely. So you've got the Sinai area of Egypt, you've got Gaza, you've got West Bank, of course, you've got Lebanon, who they've been blowing the living hell out of for goodness knows how long. You've got half of Syria, the south of Syria, which of course they've been blowing the hell out of and are occupying large swathes of it illegally against international law as it stands. You've got the entirety of Jordan. You've got a portion of Iraq, obviously, which again explains the invasion there. And you've got a portion of Saudi Arabia as well. That is the land that they believe is theirs. And this is something that has been called a conspiracy theory and an anti-Semitic dog whistle and a trope and all this kind of stuff. But they've stopped pretending. And so, lots of the soldiers fighting in the IDF, killing kids in Gaza, actually have the Greater Israel map on their shoulder, on their uniform. You can see countless photos of that. And then Netanyahu comes out last week and says that he has a spiritual connection and a dream of the Greater Israel. So he's just coming out and saying it now at the same time as he's...
So he's actually confirmed it.
Oh, yeah. But this is the thing. They don't care who knows anymore, because I think the cat is so out the bag. It's like the Labour government in the UK. Like, governments used to pretend they cared about the people. They never did, but they used to pretend. Well, they don't even pretend anymore. Like, Labour hate you, they hate me, and they don't care who knows it. That's the thing, isn't it? It's so weird that it's got to that point now where I think they've just gone, yeah, I'm done pretending. I'm bored of it. We'll just tell them straight. Yeah. And Netanyahu's like that. He's exactly the same. I think there's no point pretending, I don't think, in his mind. So he just comes out and says it. They want to build the third Solomon's temple, which of course would be built on where now Temple Mount, the Dome of the Rock, Alaska Mosque is. Well, that's not going to happen unless you want to start a third world war, which is, again, exactly what they want. And there's actually no evidence, bizarrely, there's no evidence of the first two temples ever existing in the first place. The wall the Wailing Wall that they pray to is the remains of an old Roman fort. But who cares about history when you can use your own version of history to justify what you want? It's mad. It's mad, mate, to me.
And it's even more interesting too when this is literally a biblical prophecy as well, and the rebuilding of it, in theory, then brings about the Antichrist.
Exactly.
I'm not religious, I should say, but this is something people should probably pay attention to.
100%, mate. This is the thing as well. And I keep reiterating this all the time when I'm talking about stuff, because it sounds out there, and it's like, I'm not saying I believe it. I'm saying they believe it. And when I say they, I mean political leaders. So even on, part of this biblical prophecy is also about the sacrifice and burning of the red heifer, right? So it's a red cow with not a single strand of hair on its body that isn't red. It has to be perfect. It has to be the perfect red heifer. So recently, a sect of rabbis in Jerusalem ordered a bunch of red heifers. I mean, I don't know where the animal rights activists are on this, but they ordered a bunch of red heifers to be delivered from Texas, right? Now, they were supposed to be perfect in terms of 100% red heifer. Apparently, they found one black hair on one of them, right? So it was imperfect. So it doesn't work for the ritual. But they killed and burnt it and performed the ritual ceremony anyway. This was about 3 or 4 months ago. They performed it anyway as a practice, as a rehearsal. This is 2025, but fine, whatever. Now, just in the last couple of weeks, the guy that bred those cows, is a guy from Texas, he said that heifer was perfect. There wasn't a single hair on it that wasn't red, and that actually he believes that symbolic burning of the red heifer, which then it basically starts the ball rolling in terms of bringing about the war that would lead to the building of the third temple and the coming of the Antichrist and all this kind of stuff. He's of the opinion that they did it. Now, I don't believe for a minute that burning that cow is going to make anything happen. But the problem is, and this is the thing about prophecy, if I say that it's a prophecy that I'm going to start to feel a weird tingling in my right cheek, and if I feel a tingling in my right cheek, that means X, Y, and Z in terms of bringing about the end of the world. Well, I can quite easily slap myself in the face. I can feel a tingling now. Oh, that's prophecy then. Yeah, but it's not, though, because you just smack yourself in the face, you idiot. But so that's what's happening. It's like, this is prophecy. Yeah, but it's prophecy because you're making it happen. If you think it's prophecy, it's prophecy that the tribes shall invade such and such. Well, if you give the order to invade that place, is that prophecy or is it just you doing it? But what it does is it gets people on side, particularly those of a religious persuasion. And that's another thing, I think, mate, that I've been asking myself for a while. Within the alternative media, within the alternative sphere, religion was the enemy. It was the enemy. Religion was used to control people for centuries. The amount of people murdered by the Islamic faith, by the Jewish faith, by the Christian faith, oh my goodness me, look at that. The Ottoman Empire, it did this and that. There was this huge opinion about religion as being a negative force on humanity, used to control people, used to control how they think, how they behave. Suddenly religion it's back, man. And it now leads the alternative media. All of them are all there. Even Tommy Robinson's there with his rosary beads as he comes out of prison. All these people are now suddenly religious. And I've been thinking to myself for a while, what is that about? Like, why is religion suddenly back? Why is Russell Brand suddenly Mr. Religious? I mean, part of it is he gets paid to do a Halo app by Peter Thiel. That's part of it. But either way, like, they've suddenly become religious. And then you think, this is to get support for something based on it being a biblical prophecy. Because if you didn't have this big building of religion, again, suddenly coming back from the dead, you couldn't justify acting in such a barbaric way by saying it's biblical prophecy, because people would go, yeah, it means it's bollocks, mate. Whereas now they'll go, well, yes, because I believe. And that is something that I think is coordinated. I think it's intentional.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you were saying earlier, creating the problem. We can see throughout society that degeneracy has just grown and grown.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that this would be like a natural reaction, pushing people into religion again.
100%. And this is, I don't have a problem with religion. Like, I don't. Like, if people have faith in something and a belief that helps them, especially if they've lost loved ones. I mean, do you want to believe your loved one is rotting in the ground, or do you want to believe they're in heaven? I mean, it's a no-brainer. Like, I get it. Totally get it. And I believe in something, by the way, as well. I don't know what it is. I'll find out when I get there. But I believe in something more and something, greater than ourselves. A guy on a cloud that justifies blowing up kids is not who I believe in. But that doesn't mean I don't believe in anything. I just, do you know what I mean? And so I accept, by living by the 10 Commandments, like I can accept that, which for me, like, the 10 Commandments are one commandment, which is don't be a dick. That's all they are, really, isn't it? I mean, I know, like, I think it's George Carlin breaks it down into, it means do not steal, because every single aspect of that is basically don't steal. Even taking a life, well, you're stealing someone's life. Coveting someone's wife, you're stealing someone's wife. Like, basically all that is don't take stuff that's not yours. And I can live with that. But, I would look at it slightly more crudely. It's just don't be a dick. Just live like that. Treat other people as you would like to be treated yourself, and you've got half a chance. Yeah, exactly. I don't, but then I don't think I need a guy with a scepter and a funny dress stuff to tell me that. But if people need that, that's fine.
Moving on to something else which has been on my mind. So when we talk about the superpowers of the world, like China, Russia, States, even Israel, do you believe they're all controlled, or do any of them actually act independently?
I would suggest that fundamentally they kind of probably are all answerable. This is what I find funny, even on a small level. Like, you've got the Chabad Leibovich, sect of Judaism, for instance, that you've got these talks that have happened in the last couple of days where you've got Trump, Zelensky, see Putin. It's this whole kind of, this essentially you're supposed to have three kind of separate factions within that. Well, each one of them's got a Chabad rabbi attached to them. So's RFK Jr. So you go, well, that's weird. So it's almost like each of them is still answerable to a different group and a different force. And I think, but then I also think that these people are expendable. I think all politicians are expendable. I think a lot of them are useful idiots. And as soon as they stop being useful, they become idiots and they're gone. Whether that be through, a bullet like JFK, or whether it be through a scandal like Nixon. They can get rid of you. And I think that's what they do. I think they have compromat on all of these people. And that compromat is just hidden. And when it's ready, it will come out. And Starmer is another one. So you've got 4 guys, all with links to Ukraine, all either male escorts or male models, that have torched a bunch of Starmer's stuff, Starmer's properties, Starmer's former properties, I think a car that used to belong to him that he'd recently sold. Mainstream media silence. No one asked a single question about why 4 Ukrainian rent boys are setting fire to the Prime Minister's stuff. How do they know it's his stuff? I don't know which car Starmer used to own. I don't know where his house is, his various properties. And not one single media mouthpiece has even asked Keir Starmer Do you know these men? Do you have any connection with these 4 men? Question's not been asked. Huge red flag. So you go, okay, so you're protecting Starmer, but only for now. Once Starmer gets to a point where his support within the public is so low that they want rid of him, we'll hear about those guys. We'll hear about those Ukrainian guys all day long, and that's what they do. And I think that's ultimately what they do with all these different countries. You know, one's the enemy, then it's not the enemy, and then it's the enemy, and then they switch around, and someone's the bastion of freedom tomorrow, and then the next day it's someone else, and it just keeps everyone fighting amongst each other. And this is a great example of that is AI, because most American people, MAGAs particularly, are against AI. They're against that pushing of artificial intelligence. Yet the first thing Trump does once he gets in is starts pushing it. And there was a little bit of pushback against it. And then what they did is they said that China has advanced their AI to such a point that they are going to win the AI race. At that point, the MAGAs went, well, we need AI then, because otherwise they'll win and we can't beat them. They can't beat us. So then they backed Trump in the AI race. We don't want AI, but if the Chinese are going to have it, then we better have it. Otherwise, they can use it to destroy us. Suddenly, they're supporting AI. When actually China and America have shared tens of thousands of papers on AI between various high-ranking universities in both countries for the last decade. So they're on the same side. But they have to create the enemy part of it because that's how you get support for it. And they do that a fair bit. And even in this country, how could Starmer justify, bear in mind people are stitched in terms of cost of living, standard of living is dropping. How could he justify such enormous spending on the military if a lot of people, unfortunately, didn't believe that the Russians were coming? You need to make them believe and fear the Russians so that they will allow you to do certain things. And that again comes back to fear. People are frightened of something, they'll agree to it.
When we talk about these people that are orchestrating all this, then do you think, the secret societies, do you think this goes down to like the Freemasons, or who do you think is pulling the strings?
I think they're an aspect of it, for sure. I would think that in terms of secret societies, you've got obviously the Jesuits and the Freemasons and the Skull and Bone Society and all that sort of stuff. But for me, I don't see them as being the head of the snake because I know about them, because I know what they look like and I could draw their logo. That to me it tells me that it's not the head of the snake. In the same way that Epstein's not the head of the snake, there will be people above him that you would potentially walk past it down Oxford Street or wherever and you wouldn't even know who they were. Because I think that's how secret societies work. By their very nature, they're meant to be secret. And, those organizations are not secret. I mean, they have obviously, secret parts of them, where you get initiated up to different levels. But in terms of the real head of the snake, the real string pullers, I would imagine you wouldn't be able to point them out in a lineup. Either that, or go so far the other way that they're so famous, but for something else. That's
hidden in plain sight.
Yeah, maybe David Beckham's the head of the snake. Who knows?
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, that's what they say, isn't it? True power never reveals itself. So
absolutely,
you get people pointing at the Rothschilds, the Freemasons, even the Royals.
Yeah, Klaus Schwab. Again, I don't think he's the head of the snake either. And I think because what you're always going to have in societies, you're always going to have an element that will ask questions. You're always going to have an element that, like me, I guess, has an authoritarian problem or an authority problem, and he's going to, try and look for answers for why the world is the way it is. And so they will be quite happy for you to blame the World Economic Forum, because the World Economic Forum is a step, maybe 2 steps above government. Okay, well, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, if the trail of power stops there in people's minds, as it does in a lot of people's minds, I think they're fine with that. I think they're fine with you thinking Klaus Schwab is a Bond villain, which he is, but I think they're fine with that. Once you start digging above, so who's above Klaus Schwab then? And then who's above that? And then who's above that? Once you start digging into that, I think that's where you'll come up, you'll come up with resistance. I think that they're perfectly fine with you blaming Starmer. They're perfectly fine with you blaming Boris Johnson. the public faces of tyranny, they're fine with.
Well, one of the things that I find really weird is with all these type of cults, secret societies, they kind of revolve around these rituals or devil worshipping. And I'm sure you're aware of this, but one of the craziest stories that I saw was how there's top members of the Israel rabbis, politicians, all performing these satanic rituals. And it's only now that the victims have actually come forward. And they say it's been going on for decades, and police literally don't know what to do about it.
This stuff, mate, honestly, it is everywhere within the establishment. It's not just Israel. It infests the establishment. There's multiple reasons for it, but one of the reasons for it will be it's a great way to control these people. Because if you've got a nice guy or even just an all right guy that isn't a psychopath, then you don't know which way that person's going to go in terms of how they're going to act, what they're going to say publicly, how they're going to decide to work politically or whatever. But if you know that person has fetishes that are twisted and dark, and you can have them recorded doing it, well, you own them. At that point, you own them. And this stuff is, honestly, I remember years and years ago, right, I went to Mull, an island off Scotland, for a gig. I used to perform up in Scotland quite a bit. Just one, I love Scotland. Two, they're up for a party. And three, they paid well, actually, which, Scottish people are not famous for, but they did. And so we arrived, me and my mate Jono, Scottish guy, and we were met off the boat by this taxi driver. And he drove us to the venue in Tobermory, and it was a bit of a drive. And so you get chatting, don't you, as you do with cabbies. And so we're talking. Anyway, he used to be the Sheriff of the Isles. Now, I'm not like a Scottish police historian, but I am aware that the Sheriff of the Isles it's a relatively big gig. And this dude's driving a cab. So I said, so what happened? And he said, basically, he's from Glasgow, and he was working in Paisley, rough area. I think it's been a bit gentrified now, but it was a rough area. And basically he was earmarked for the top, essentially, in terms of the police in Scotland. Came from a long line of police officers, career mapped out probably when he's a teenager. And so they said, if you work as a Sheriff of the Isles, 1 year stint, on your CV, it's a piece de la résistance. You want to do that. So he moved his family out to Mull, and lived for a year as Sheriff of the Isles, which was Mull, Iona, Rum, Col, Tyree. I think they were the main ones. Maybe some other little islands as well. Sleepy little gig, sod all to do, but it looks good on the CV. So, so he did that. And so I'm like, okay, that sounds interesting. I'm thinking to myself, still doesn't explain why you're a cabbie. And then he went down a road which I didn't expect him to go down. He said, and then I uncovered a satanic paedophile ring. And I went, all right, I'm listening now. Go on. And he discovered this ring with his colleague on the island of Col, which is a tiny island. It does have a real tiny population, a few hundred probably. I think it probably swells a bit in the summer, but, permanent residency is just a few hundred. He said, we were getting these reports of these sacrificed animals and blood daubed on doors and all this kind of stuff, like real dark, sinister, American Werewolf in London style stuff. And he said, and they wouldn't let it go, basically. And they got to the bottom of it, and they discovered that it was, he said to me, it was the solicitor. He said it was the counsellor. And they were all high-ranking people within the local community. It wasn't like, oh yeah, that weird kid, I always thought he was odd. It was high-ranking people. Mm. And he said, we had them banged to rights. And he said, and I went back to the Police Scotland with Bosch. And he said, and that was it. Career done, finished.
Wow.
And my mate John was going, what? And I was going, I ain't surprised. Mate. And that was it. He basically then was sent back to Glasgow, had a really shitty desk job for a bit, and then ended up working, not quite traffic police, but, irrelevant jobs, just irrelevant stuff. And his career petered out, and that was the end of it. And he basically said, but my kids loved Mull so much that we ended up moving back, and I'm a cabbie now and whatever, And you're just like, yeah, that stuff is everywhere. And the point that to me that was so important that he said was, it's the solicitor, it's the counsel, it's not the weird kid in the mum's basement that kills hamsters. It's these upstanding members of society that you probably look at across the restaurant and go, yeah, he's a good guy. Yeah, mate. Not sure he is.
Do you feel though, like, do you think it's all about the blackmail, or is there this supernatural side? Because, like you were saying, why do they go through the effort of building this 20-foot owl? Why do they put such a show of it?
Oh, I think they believe in it, mate. I think they believe in what that fear can produce in terms of energy. That sounds dead hippie, but that stuff goes on in terms. I always use it as an example. Like if you walk into a room, I've done it so many times. I've walked into a room, you look around, and you go, "Have you had a row?" But no one's saying anything. Like someone might be drinking a cup of tea, someone's reading a magazine, but something's gone off because there's an atmosphere in the room. There's an energy in the room, and that energy is all around us all times, and and that's just maybe two people having a row in the lounge. So you imagine what kind of negativity that you can produce by doing such horrendous things, particularly to children, like the most innocent of all of us. They believe in this stuff, mate. They believe in it. They feed on it. You've also got the adrenochrome stuff, which is it's seen as a conspiracy theory. But this stuff goes on, organ harvesting and all this stuff. It's insane. And I don't want to be a neg Nelly and make people feel like fucking frightened, because there is such amazing things in this world as well. Like there's amazing people and there's amazing stuff happens every single day, but there is a real dark element to it, and it infests the establishment. It does. Like it's not just some fucking weirdo in a basement. Like even with the organ harvesting part of it, like I interviewed someone the other day called Heidi Klesseg, and she's an anaesthetist, and she said she went in for her first pre-organ transplant thing, where she would obviously give some drugs to the corpse, she believed, so that it would either thicken the blood slightly so blood wouldn't squirt, but whatever. I don't know what the drugs were, whatever. And she said that the consultant said, well, are you not going to give some anesthetic? So she's like, what do you mean? So for pain management. It's like, he's dead. What do you mean, pain management? But they're not dead. So what you've got is, if you're dead, I can't take your organs. I didn't know this till this interview. I can't take your organs because they're dead. And now I hear it said out loud. It's like, well, obviously. And I can't take your organs if you're alive, because that's murder. But if you're brain dead, your body is alive and I can harvest your organs. But technically, because of a technicality and a change in the law, you're dead. But you're not dead. And she was making the point of people, she says upwards of 200 people that she's interviewed for her book that were pronounced dead and were about to be harvested for their organs, that are now married with kids, alive, fine, not a problem, working a 40-hour-a-week job. She said one story of a guy who had such a horrendous motorcycle accident that basically part of his brain was leaking out of his ear. Like this guy had it. And the helicopter had arrived with the organ harvesting team to come get the organs out, because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Yet his brother wasn't having it. So his brother's like, no chance, and the rest of the family are all crying and whatever. He's like, no, it's not happening. No, it's happening. So he smacks his brother, smacks him. And his brother moved or blinked or something. But the nurses said, oh, no, that's normal. We were taught that in school, like in medical school, that's normal. And at this point, the brother, who's clearly desperate, pulls a knife or a flick knife, pocket knife, whatever, out of his pocket and stabs his brother's foot, to which his brother throws a right hook at him. He's dead. Throws a right hook at him. At that point, the nurses are like, oh, my God. And, obviously he's still alive, blah, blah. And he's alive, married with kids. And what's really twisted is when she interviewed this guy that's now alive with kids, he said because he was under sedation, he could hear everything that was happening. He could hear the nurses explaining to his parents how they were going to take the organs, where those organs would go, whose lives those organs would keep alive, what a great job he was doing, and he's alive the whole time. Now, if you can have that happening every single day, because that'll be happening while we speak to some poor soul, then it's not too much of a far reach to think that the people making those decisions behind that world we live in pretty dark and sinister people that are doing stuff for some real twisted reasons. And it doesn't necessarily mean that I believe in it, that it makes a difference, but they obviously do, and that's what matters. As long as they believe in it and they do it, that's what matters.
Wow. So actually, and obviously one of the big things that your dad always spoke about was the premise of reptilians. And I know obviously so much over his career has come to fruition. So much has been proven to be true. This was always one of the ones which people had an issue with. What were your thoughts about that?
Well, it's still, up until recently was one that got him the controlled opposition label. They would say that, he speaks all this truth, but then he says this crazy shit and he does it to discredit everything else, discredit everyone else in the field. Now, his attitude is basically the same as mine, which is if I believe something to be true and I've got enough evidence and enough, credible sources to back it up, then I'll say it. And if people don't like it and don't believe it, that's fine. They don't have to. But I'm not going to edit myself. Because then what's the point? Because you're not a truth teller then, are you? You're a publicly acceptable truth teller. Although what's funny is he actually sent me a message a couple of days ago from, I don't know if you've seen this, there's I think it's a Senate hearing at the minute where they're talking to people from the CIA. There's a Republican congressman particularly who's talking to members of, I think it's NASA, the CIA, and the Pentagon about, alien encounters basically and stuff that they've, it's not quite full disclosure, but they're talking about stuff that's certainly never been spoken about before. And this person says that they have evidence of 4 extraterrestrial races. So I'm like, well, that's interesting. So the Greys is the one. I guess that's the one that everyone would. If I asked a 5-year-old to draw an alien, they draw a Grey, right? That's what they draw. And then there was the Nordics, which is quite an interesting one, sort of blonde hair, blue-eyed, kind of like characters. And then there was one which was like a bug-like creature, like an insect-type creature thing. It's like, yeah, I've seen them. And then it was funny because then he was like, and then the fourth one is the reptiles, like this. And I was like, this is being spoke about in American like politics. Like, what that's interesting. And so that kind of stuff is starting to kind of seep into the public domain now, into the public consciousness. And what I find funny about it, interesting about it, is you have particularly the religious types, particularly the Christian types, that will go at Dad, because he's Luciferian, because he's not a Christian or whatever, and they mock the reptilian stuff and the alien stuff, and but then when you read the Bible, it tells you in there of an alien race that came down and interbred with humans to build a hybrid race. All this stuff is in there. And they all have different names within all religious texts, whether it be Islam, which I think that, you've got the jinn, which are like these demons. And then obviously the demons you've got in Christianity. And you've got the Anunnaki and the Chitauri. And there's all these different religions, but they all describe the same thing. Which, and Dad says to me, like, the main thing he looks for is not what divides stuff. So not what people disagree on, because there's loads of that. But let's find the stuff that they all agree on, that they all say happened. And, and then you look at old carvings on caves and stuff, going back hundreds of years. These enormous creatures, often reptilian in form, are featured in all of these things, and it's for me, I don't discount anything because I'm not a know-it-all, and I don't, I think it's really dangerous. As soon as you get to a point where you go, no, like I'll believe this, but I won't believe that, then that's dangerous. And so, with that stuff, it's interesting. I mean, don't get me wrong. When that came into conversation over the family dinner table, I obviously went, what? As anyone would, because it's like we were just talking about football, and now it's gone. It's gone somewhere else. But then the idea as well, if you'd have spoke about the idea of a non-player character 20 years ago, people would have thought you were crazy. Whereas now people go, yeah, I know him. I know plenty of non-player characters, mate. It's funny.
What is interesting, even I'm fascinated, and I'm of the same opinion, unless I can prove it definitively, realistically, I don't know. So we got to leave it open-ended.
Exactly.
But what is interesting is out of the 6 major religions, 5 of them all reference some type of evil reptile or godlike serpent, right? And obviously Adam and Eve, you have the serpent, which is portrayed as Lucifer. You have, I think in Judaism, you have like a Leviathan, some giant godlike snake. And then you got the Nagas, which are throughout Hinduism and Buddhism too.
Yeah, it's the same story. It's the same story. And then, you look at, buildings in the city of London, like these things have these dragons on them, and it's almost like they always tell you what's going on. It's it's very interesting, all of that stuff. And I'm the same as you, but I think what most people do is they go, right, well, if I can't prove it, it can't be true. So okay, well that's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is if I can't prove it, I can't believe it to be true yet. So unless I can prove it and therefore go, oh wow, okay, or completely disprove it to a point where you've smashed it out the park. Like, I can't fly. I wish I could, but I can't. So that's quite easy for me to go to disprove. I mean, I'm not going to jump off a skyscraper to prove it, but I can jump off a 6-foot wall and flap my wings, put my arms out, and I might break my nose, but I can prove it, right? And until someone can, show me how to do it, then I can't do it. I've tried. I actually have tried. And I can't do it. Where there's other things where you go, well, I can't. How do I do that? What do I do? Do I go back 2,000 years? How do I disprove it? So disproving it is as difficult as it is, I guess, to prove it. So in which case, well, I'm open. I'm open to stuff. I'm certainly open to a non-human force controlling the world, because I just have to look around me and just say, there's no humanity in these people. There's none. Like, there's no humanity in these people that are committing a genocide, or that are freezing pensioners, or that are abusing children. There's no humanity there. So the idea that those people would be possessed by something that isn't human, that's not too far of a stretch for me, really.
Yeah. I wanna change subject slightly, but equally as important, something that I think a lot of people want to know. You have 2030 seems to be the deadline for a lot of these agendas.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that we really should be paying attention to? And also, what is it that we as a people should be doing in order to push back?
Non-complying. First one. Non-complying. Don't take the bait. If you're seeing something on the media, or you've got a politician telling you something, or overwhelmingly now a bloody influencer telling you something, instead of just hearing it and going and being reactionary, have an attitude of, this is what I do. I go, right, okay, this is starting to make me feel in a certain way, right? Now, how would the establishment gain? How would, as an overarching term, the establishment, how would they gain from me feeling like this? Do they gain from me feeling like this? And if the answer is yes, okay, well, I'm going to sit on the back burner with that one then, because I feel like I'm being gaslit. I feel like I'm being made to feel a certain way. Okay. And to actually not be so reactionary, because it's all well and good. It's easy to see a news story or something and get angry about it. Take to social media. Take the Southport stabbings, murders as an example. How many people saw that and went bang and reacted in a certain way and said things that they probably wouldn't say? Lots. Now, saying things and doing things are very different things, of course. But there's lots of people that go and do things without thinking things through. So that would be part of it for me, I think, is civil non-compliance, peaceful non-compliance. Because as I said before, if you're chucking rocks at coppers, they'll deal with you. They want you doing that. So that's a huge part of it, is just non-compliance, not going along with stuff. If you think March 2020, they said we're locking you down, and a large enough portion of the population went, no, you're not, it would have ended. If one cafe in the village decides to stay open, that's fine. The police will come around and deal with them. If every cafe in the town or every pub went, no, we're not doing it, and stayed open, and every pub in the next village and every pub in the next town said, no, we're not closing down, there's not enough police officers to enforce it. So that's one very simple way of not going along with it. I think in terms of the Agenda 2030 stuff, I think that's because they know that. I think there's a hurry to get to that date, because I feel like they want everything in place by then, because they know that there is an awakening. You know, if I just think back to my dad, like he was talking to one man in a phone box 20 years ago. It's steamrolled, like in the last few years, particularly, where loads and loads of people are waking up. You know, these demons are coming out of the shadows a little bit now, more. And so I think 2030 is something that they've probably identified as, if we don't get this agenda in by now, by that date, then we could be in trouble. Which is why they want everything digital. And that's why digital ID is the hill to die on at the moment. Because once they get everything in, where they can completely delete you from society if you don't play ball. Because at the moment, if I go into the local shop and I go, all right, mate, yeah, blah, blah, food, blah, blah, I go, okay, my card doesn't work. All right, there is money on it. I mean, we've all been there. Card doesn't work. Oh, that's annoying. All right, well, I've got some cash. Yeah. Bosh. Fine, I've got it. If you take cash away and it's gone, and it's what they want to do, and they did it through COVID, didn't they? They gave people the excuse to stop taking cash all of a sudden, when that was illegal before. You had to take it because it was legal tender. Now, since COVID, it's fine, yeah, we don't take cash, we're cashless now. Suddenly, the state can control whether you can eat, essentially, what you can do. That's huge. It can control where you can go, where you can spend your money. So, you know, I can go into a grocery store. Everything's attached to my digital ID. All of my money, everything is there. My compliance score, the whole lot of it is all on there. And if I want to go and buy a couple of rump steaks, well, no, you had steak last week, son. All right, it won't let me buy that then. And people think that's far-fetched. They think that the idea of that is crazy. And then you say, well, you do know in China that millions of people aren't allowed to use public transport because their social credit score is too low. And they look at you with a fluoride stare of like, no way. Yeah, way. And that is exactly the world that they want for the rest of us. And if we accept it and go along with it, then that's what we'll get. It's that whole thing, isn't it? That people get the government they deserve. And I think to a certain element that's true, because you get what you're willing to put up with. If you're willing to allow yourself to be punched in the face, you'll get punched in the face. There has to come a point where you say, no, I'm not doing it. And that I think has to happen in the next 5 years. It has to, you know, because once everything's digital, once everything is connected to a central system that can say yes or no to you, it's going to be very difficult to resist within that.
Well, okay. Well, final question then. And I've got a gist of where your head's at. One of the things that, you know, goes off in my mind every now and then is the interview that your dad had with Terry Wogan.
Yeah.
And your dad is saying, well, the truth is I'm frustrated because we're walking into George Orwell's 1984 day by day. How do you feel about the future? Are you optimistic or, you know, are we all doomed?
I'm a Derby County fan, mate. I'm massively optimistic. I have to be. Otherwise, I don't get up in the morning. No, I think I am optimistic. I am. Because like I say, you know, go back 20 years, Dad was talking to one man in the phone box. The fact that people are now starting to see stuff is huge, because that's the first step, right? That's the first port of call where people go, okay, right, the world isn't like I thought it was. You know, you don't get called a maniac anymore. You used to get called a maniac all the time. Still get called an arsehole sometimes, and that's fine. But you don't get called a maniac anymore because people are struggling to dismiss what you're saying. They can call you names. That for me is the point that they've lost an argument. But they can't argue with what you're saying because it's all around us. Everyone can see it clear as day. And that's one positive, because I always try and find a positive in something. That's one positive with the world getting worse and more obviously worse, is it's waking people up. And it's driving more and more people to the point where they've got nothing left to lose, which on the face of it is horrendous. People are being driven into poverty and desperation. That's obviously a bad thing. But at that point, when you don't have something to protect, like a little nest egg, you know, how it was before, you had the upper classes, they do what they like. You had the lower classes and the working classes that were getting shit on from a great height all the time. And you had this big chunk of the middle class that could have done and said something about it, but they didn't, because they were doing all right. It's that I'm all right, Jack thing, isn't it? You know, I'm all right. My house is nice. Sorry, yours is shit, but mine's all right. Whereas now,
not my job.
Not my job yet. But now they've gone for the middle classes. They've gone for them, and in a big way, particularly in the United States. And so now there's a larger group of people that are going, hang on a minute. And so the more people get to that point where there's nothing left to lose, that's when the fight back really starts. Because for me, like, if I'm being attacked by someone, and I know my dad's used this analogy before, if I'm being attacked by someone, I can leg it. Right? I can leg it. I can run away, get away. If I don't think I can beat them, I'm legging it. Well, in the end, if you keep running, which is what people have been doing, essentially kicking the can down the road, it'll be all right if I vote for the next guy, he'll change it. Eventually, you're going to come to a precipice. You're going to come to the cliff's edge. Well, what do you do at that point? You can't run anymore. So do you jump? Well, what's the point? That's the point you go, do you know what? If I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down swinging. And so that's the point you turn around and you start throwing haymakers, hoping that one lands. Metaphorically, of course, because I'm non-violent. But that is what I think people are getting pushed to that point now, where they're starting to turn around and go, well, if I carry on accepting what's being thrown at me, if I carry on accepting my energy bills going up even higher and my food costs going up even higher, I don't have any money left. Like, I've got nothing. So actually, I need to do something. I need to turn around and I need to fight back. And that is where my optimism is, which is strange, because it's almost like in the long run, it's a good thing it's getting worse. In the short term, it's horrendous. I mean, I'll go into a shop now and I look around and I'm like, how much? What? Like, in what world is it that much? But that is what it is everywhere now. And I hear it all the time where people just go, oh, that's expensive, isn't it? And you hear someone go, I know everything's expensive, because it's meant to be, because they're kind of destroying people. But suddenly, once people are at that point where it's fight or flight, that's where you'll see people fight back. And that's where my optimism is, for sure.
Wow. Gareth, thank you so much. Also, is there a place where everyone can get hold of you, like if they want to get into contact with you?
Yeah, I mean, I always say X or Twitter, whatever, and I always say just for now, because I don't believe it's actually a free speech platform. The amount of shadow banning on there is mad, so I'm sure I won't be there forever, but I'm on there for now. And then iconic.com is the main place, because that's our own platform. So unless I start censoring myself, hopefully I'll always be there. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Can't tell you how much I appreciate this chat.
That was great, mate. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed our show. As you can see, our content can be a tad controversial at times. Because of that, the algorithm really, really doesn't like us. The good news is that's where you can. If you like us and you want to support us, the easiest ways are to like, comment, and subscribe. It costs you nothing, but it means the world to us here at BluntClarity. On top of that, we've made a list of some of our favorite videos, which you can find right here. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Enjoy.